He wants to move the dial on human flourishing in the spiritual, in all the areas, but at a national level, at a big level. But we lost 3 of our friends, South Africans, that were killed in an attack. Every entrepreneur that is following Jesus has been gifted by God with that gift. It is a gift to create value, and therefore it is a spiritual gift. Is it one that's listed in the Bible? No. But if it's from God, it is a spiritual gift.
Curt Laird, founder and managing director at ReFrontier. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. I will start by saying a few things about ReFrontier because I have a specific question in mind. So ReFrontier, it's a for-profit holding company and a non-profit development organization joined together. And that was the first thing that caught my eye. At its very core, it reaches for sustainable, it's called actually a sustainable leadership factory, committed to catalyzing citizens needed to create a movement.
Yeah.
That's a very big statement. And the first question that came to my mind was, let's address this merge between a non-profit and a for-profit. How is that working in your case? And what is the end goal? What is the bigger goal? Because I sense that there's a bigger goal there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't merge it in terms of legally because it has to be separate. Accounting is separate. But what we do is we're saying, look, we have a goal, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but we have a goal, we have a purpose. We want to utilize all the resources towards that purpose and towards that goal. And so there is a pool of capital that is available for investing, and there's a pool of capital that is available for charitable giving. Usually what has happened, those two have not combined together. So oftentimes a company or an investment fund will have a foundation and they'll do good things. They'll take care of widows, they'll, orphans, whatever. They'll do good things.
Schools.
Yeah. But what they're not doing is that is not directly interwoven with the purposes of the portfolio. So if, as believers, our purpose is for the shalom, for the human flourishing, which is spiritual, and ultimately Jesus being the Prince of Shalom is a relationship with Jesus, but it's also about all the other aspects of shalom, health, prosperity, justice, righteousness. This is shalom. The word shalom is wholeness and completeness. So if we're looking at affecting that and moving the dial on that, we need to use all the resources concentrated for that purpose. But what so often happens is we don't combine those two together strategically. So ReFrontier has the economic engine, which is driving sustainability, it's driving human flourishing in that aspect. But the foundation then is turned inward in the sense that it is maximizing the impact, the social, spiritual, environmental, financial impact of the portfolio. It's maximizing the communities that the businesses are in, all for the purpose of ultimately shalom. So that way you get the nonprofit does what it's good at. The for-profit does what it's good at. I'm an entrepreneur, so I love to build businesses. I love creating jobs. I love maximizing scaling. My wife, Katrina, is a social development world expert. She is good at impact and understanding the nuances. You put those two together, you have a much more powerful entity that is driving for shalom.
That's very interesting. I think it's the first time I hear about this concept, about this possible merger between the two. I want to ask you, since we are at this point, what does your what from this merger, let's call it like that, fires up your heart? Because we talk a lot about organizations, companies, NGOs, but they are all made of people.
Yeah.
And what does it fire up Curt Laird's heart?
So I think the thing that I look at is I believe that Jesus is about national, international, but let's talk about national shalom. He wants to move the dial on human flourishing in the spiritual, in all the areas, but at a national level, at a big level. So I I take the example of Jesus with his disciples. He took 12 men, and then of course the 70 who were men and women, and he spent 3.5 years with them. And they then, when he left, they took the church and scaled it across the entire known world in 100, 200 years. Massive scaling, massive influence, changed the world to this day. He started with 12. But what he did was he was in the mud with them day in and day out. If you've ever seen the TV show The Chosen, it's a beautiful show. I really encourage people to get into it and stay in it. It builds for a while, but it shows Jesus in the mud. And what was he doing? He was taking those leaders with him into ministry. And while they were going, they were falling down. Poor Peter was always sticking his foot in his mouth, but Jesus would pick him up out of the mud, clean him off, and say, okay, Peter, here's a mindset, a belief that I want you to shift about yourself, about who I am. And Peter was just constantly going through it, as were the others. But in 3.5 years, their mindsets shifted to the point where they could go from being illiterate fishermen, some of them, to changing the entire world. And so what is the parallel for me as a business person is that if I think about Jesus changing Kenya or Uganda or any other country, it's going to be done through leaders, local leaders. But those local leaders need 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day of being in the mud with mentors, not from the distance, not doing online coaching. It's good, but being in the mud. So the model that we have is that we as leadership, which is both expat and locals, we are in the mud with our local leaders. So that we, in 3.5 years, 5 years, whatever it takes, we back off, we send them out, and in 20 years, they shift the nation. It's not the business that's going to shift the nation, right? Okay, the hospitals would be good. We're investing in a pharmacy chain. It's good. It's doing good work. It's the leaders who are shifted who are going to change the nation. And so that is pulling everything we can into that effort of discipling those leaders into positions where they then influence the whole nation.
Very interesting. But is it sustainable from the business perspective? Because in this day and age, profit needs to come first and fast.
Yep.
But you're talking about developing people. It's a bit counterintuitive.
Yes.
How does that work?
We'll take the example of the pharmacy chain. So my Kenyan co-founder is Dr. Louis is a pharmacist, and he's already built a 52 location pharmacy chain and exited. We're going to do it again. So we are going to take from zero, we're going to grow 200 pharmacy locations. So we're going to scale that. So financially, the returns are going to be big by scaling it with good systems, good leadership. But what we're going to do in that is we're going to hire pharmacists who are not just technical, excellent pharmacists, but they are community leaders. So imagine if you had 200 Kenyan pharmacists who are community leaders all across Kenya. They will be points of shalom across the entire nation, but the investors are going to get their returns back because we're going from 0 to 200 locations or even more across East Africa. So it's a good business. That's what I'm good at, is scaling businesses. I can bring good financial returns. The foundation then is working on making sure that the impact keeps up with the business, that we never lose sight of that.
That's amazing. In the intersection of faith and entrepreneurship, what unique challenges and opportunities have you encountered when navigating the local and the global ecosystem? And maybe you can refer to Africa, since I understand that you have an interest there.
So that's a really good question, and the most difficult thing is the sacred secular divide that is still within the church. It's very strong still in America. It's very strong in Kenya. There's this idea that if you are a business person, okay, it's almost a necessary evil. We like your money, right? You're the ATM machine, but ministry? And I believe so strongly that every entrepreneur that is following Jesus has been gifted by God with that gift. It is a gift to create value, and therefore it is a spiritual gift. Is it one that's listed in the Bible? No. But if it's from God, it is a spiritual gift. And what I am doing with my gift of building businesses is my ministry. I do not believe that divide should be there. But a lot of people still do, and even some pastors, and I just encourage pastors, embrace entrepreneurship, embrace business people, not as just money makers, not as doing necessary evil.
Helping the church's cause.
Exactly.
With money.
Look at them as actual ministers of the gospel, because how many hours a day does a business leader who's following Jesus, how many hours a day do they have influence on the people below them? 8 hours a day.
At least.
At least. How many hours does a pastor have with that person?
3.
3 hours a week,
Tops.
maybe? So this is an untapped ministry force that has been shunted aside too long. And so it can be really lonely as an entrepreneur out there, because sometimes you don't feel like you have the support of the pastor. And the pastor's mindsets need to have that transformative shift also, so that they can see us as co-ministers.
Amazing. How do you see the faith-driven entrepreneurship impact in communities, again, locally and the global scale? And I'm thinking about the example that you just mentioned with the pharmacy chain. Is it a pharmacist? Is a pharmacist playing a specific role in the African culture? Is it well spoken of?
Yeah.
How does that affect or can affect the local environment?
So in the case of pharmacists, in Africa, generally the pharmacist is the first touch of the health system. They are like the family doctor or the general practitioner, especially out farther from the cities. So if somebody's sick, they go to the pharmacist first. But if the pharmacist has not been trained well in kind of diagnosis, if they don't have really quality pharmaceuticals and drugs, that is not a good experience. There's a lot of bad health results that come from that. So for us, having that competency out there is very important, but it's also partly because that's the way Jesus would be. He would be excellent in everything he does, would be excellent. So even if we put them out at the edge, we are going to train them, and we're going to not only train them in the technical competence, but as leaders and developers of leaders. Because again, ultimately, it is the leader who's going to transform countries, not the business itself.
You mentioned in your presentation that you were also involved in Afghanistan. Can you tell us more about what you did there and what is the goal that you're trying to reach in that country?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience.
We felt the passion from your speech.
It cost me a lot, and my wife, it cost us a lot to be there. We lost more than a dozen friends that were assassinated by the Taliban. At one point, we were standing by the window of our house in Kabul, and a bomb went off, and the windows, luckily, they rattled. Luckily, they had bomb film on them, or we would have been showered with glass. We knew, and then there were gunshots. We knew that our friends were dying at that moment. And it was a very sobering time, because we also didn't know whether it was a broader attack. And so we went into our kind of safety space, and we were waiting to see. And no attack came on us, but we lost 3 of our friends, South Africans, that were killed in an attack by the Taliban. There's a cost going into these difficult places. But we were also part of, I helped set up the mobile phone company. We were part of bringing a piece of shalom into that place. And it was a place where I would openly tell them that I was a follower of Jesus because I was a businessman. I'm not there to proselytize, but I am showing them, by loving the Afghans, my employees, my colleagues, I'm showing them the love of Jesus. I'm the hands and feet of Jesus. And we had lots of discussions about our beliefs. And so that was a positive. And then just basically being there to sow human flourishing. It saddened us now that the Taliban have taken over. It's really crushed us. But someday we'll go back. Someday we will go back, because it's a land that is just so in need of the love of God in there, and the hands and feet of Jesus to be in there. So I helped build the mobile phone company. We went from a $40 million investment up to $1 billion in 3.5, 4 years. It was a rocket ship. I've been in firefights. I've missed an IED, roadside bomb, by just a few minutes that God slowed me down at a gate for the few minutes that made me miss that. So it cost, but what joy it is to be exactly where God is meant to be. And again, we are ministers. We are ministers as we go out of the love of Jesus in those places. And the challenge for Romanian believers and for American believers is find that place that God has gifted you to be and go be in the middle of that. Go be right in the middle of that, wherever that takes you.
In spite of the fear
In
or the dangers.
spite of the fear. We always would say the safest place in the world is to be right in the center of God's will. It doesn't mean you won't die. We had 13 of our friends were killed in Afghanistan, but it means it's the safest place, and it is a place where there's a resonance of the spirit that you are doing what God has you to do. And so if you're an entrepreneur in Romania, an entrepreneur in Kenya, America, the same thing. Embrace it as a gift. Embrace it as what God has gifted you to do, and in that you'll find such blessing.
But then, what do you do with fear and with doubt? Because sometimes, maybe the Afghanistan example it's more relevant to fear and doubt. But maybe we are in an environment like we are in Romania, which is, we don't have war. Okay, we have Ukraine very near, but still we are at peace. But when you are in the middle of something, fear creeps up, doubt creeps up. What do you do with those?
So I was sitting in Western Afghanistan. I had gone out to set up the mobile phone company. And I was sitting in the office in my apartment, which was I wasn't married at the time, right above the business. And I got a call from the U.S. Embassy, and it was a frantic call. And it said, "Get to the American military base. You are being hunted." And I knew, because I could hear, there was a mob that was out there looking for foreigners and especially Americans, because they were not happy that the Afghan government had taken out one of their warlords. And I remember standing there, and I remember fear starting in literally I could feel it in my toes, and this fear went right up into my head, and I looked around my room and I said, I can take two things before I flee. What are the two things that I would take? And it's a question that we need to ask, all of us need to ask. What is important in life? What would you take if you knew your life was in danger? Because what happens is you would probably take your family, let's say. Everything else is open hands to God, right? At those moments, the crystallizing effect of that fear crystallize what is important in life. And all the things about making money and all the accomplishments and all the vacations, everything was gone. Literally, it was gone at that moment. And nothing else mattered but my life and taking two things. In this case, I didn't have a family. In the end, I couldn't go because the rest of my staff were not able to go to the base, and I couldn't go myself and be safe when they weren't, so I stayed. But fear can actually be something that drives us to reevaluate what's important. It drives us to Jesus, right? So embrace the fear rather than do everything because a lot of people will drink, they'll, try to do distractions, escape. No, embrace the fear, because in that is a purity of priority, right? The same with doubt. When my friends were killed, I had 4 friends that were assassinated, point blank assassinated.
You had to have your doubts.
You go, what are you doing, God? What are you doing? Are you a loving God? Your promise is to protect them, is what So in that, embrace that doubt, embrace the struggle of that doubt. If you're running a business and it's not doing well, don't escape from the doubt. Don't escape from the fear. Embrace it, because God is in the middle of that. God is ready. It strips you bare of all the other things. And right there, it's you and God. Embrace it. He can handle it. He's the God of the universe. You look through the Bible and so many people, David yelled at God. Why are we so afraid to live in that and embrace it and seek the face of God in the middle of both of those?
How do we know when to really pack our bags and go home?
That is a good question. The way that Katrina and I met Katrina, my wife, who's British and Finnish, and I met her in Afghanistan. Incredible woman who God had chosen for me from eternity, I believe.
I hope she sees this.
Yes, she knows how much I admire her. We believe that God will call you to something, and you stay there until he calls you to something else. Don't leave because it gets hard. Don't leave when everything is against you. If it's your time to pack your bags and go, and it was for us in Afghanistan in 2015, he will call us to something else. And that's a positive way, rather than a defeated kind of, I didn't make it. Ask God to call us to a new ministry, to a new endeavor, to a new walk of faith, which is exactly what we did. And that has went from Afghanistan to Nigeria, and then from Nigeria to Kenya. And from Kenya, it will take us somewhere else.
Basically, you're saying that God works in a crescendo.
Yes.
Even though a season ends, there's a crescendo
I
that you can
believe
see.
And he might call you into a desert, but he calls you to something. We believe that that's how God works, and wait until that happens. Hang in there, keep going. It may come from other people, but it will be a call.
Great. One last question. Is it your first time in Romania?
No, it isn't. It is my 4th time. The first time I came to Romania was 1990.
Oh my God, that's a long time ago.
Which ages me a little bit here. I came right after the revolution in, I think it was like April or June.
A couple of months.
There were still bullet holes in the walls, and I got all the stories. And honestly, I really fell in love with Romania. I could see what it had been. I knew the history of it being the breadbasket of Europe. I knew that there were hardworking people and resources that were available, but it had been oppressed by communism. And I looked at it, and as an entrepreneur, I see value. I see the potential, right? So I traveled with one of my friends all through Romania, and we just fell in love with it. I also knew a Romanian American who had escaped under Ceausescu and then had come back. So I came back in 95 to look at starting a business. It didn't work. We ran into some corruption at that point, and we wouldn't pay the bribe, and we lost a multi-million-dollar business startup. because we wouldn't pay the bribe. But I still, that's okay. Those are little vestiges of the old way of thinking, you know? And so then I came back last year and met with Ruben and Guild Faith. And oh my word, it was such an encouragement to see not only that Romania has really risen, but to begin to see that mindset changing, especially among the younger generation. So it's been a real encouragement. And I believe that Romania actually, and I was just telling Ruben and Cornelio this, Romanians need to look and think about exporting the Guild Faith and the BAM kind of ideas and ecosystem development, to write about it and export those ideas, because I believe honestly that God is doing a new thing in Romania that the rest of the world needs to hear about. And so that's an encouragement to me. From 1990 to 2024,
you see the difference.
You see the difference, and it's beautiful, and God is moving.
If you would be 40 again, you would be a Romanian Curt Laird with everything that you know now, and you would be in Romania. What would you do?
At the core of everything I would do is, I'm a business guy, an entrepreneur, so business, but at the core would be discipleship. And not discipleship again in like just the church doing a discipleship program. I would start businesses that I would take young Romanian entrepreneurs and business people, operators, some won't be entrepreneurs, they'll be operators, and I would be with them in the mud of building, of scaling national businesses with the view that the way I look at it is that we are yeast. We are yeast, and all the ingredients, the young entrepreneurs are there, right? It's for making bread. All
they
the
just
ingredients.
Need a starter.
There's a starter, but here's the thing. Yeast must disappear. If you taste the yeast in the bread, in the baked bread, something went wrong. If the leaders stay in those positions, if outsiders who come in as catalytic, if they stay in those positions, something is wrong, because the yeast disappears. It starts so as a Romanian leader, I would start it, and then I would want to back out of it, go do something else, let them go on, because it's the leaders who are going to shift Romania, not the businesses. Businesses come and go. But if we have the businesses that will scale the leaders, we will make a huge difference in Romania.
That's amazing, and I like the fact that you point out that leaders need to be involved, but then there's a season to withdraw and let the young leaders go. Yep. But something very important that you mentioned at the beginning, that the bigger leaders in the beginning, they need to be in the mud with the people. Usually, and the culture, I think, extremely points out that you need to be out of the business, you need to make a great exit and leave your people behind and live the beautiful life. Yeah. But I think we often forget that the need of big, mature leaders to be in the mud with the small leaders. I think that makes whole difference.
Yeah, don't exit and retire. If you leave a business, you still stay involved perhaps, or you exit. Go start another business, because you're seeding that. You've got that experience. You've got that gravitas. You can take those leaders to the next level. Never retire.
Go back in the mud.
Go back in the mud. And this is the way that Jesus did. He took his disciples with him as he was doing ministry, but let's call it business in a sense. He was healing just like the pharmacist would do, he was healing their sicknesses. But really the purpose was to take his leaders with him, train them, because they were going to scale the church.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Curt.
You bet. It's a pleasure.
For me as well.